Mason, welcome to the first of my podcast. I'm so excited to have you on. It's a podcast that gives creators and adventurers like yourself really a platform to kind of go through and describe themselves and kind of get into some of the detail and the nuances of their life and what they do. Now, I'm going to introduce you as what I would call a prolific all-around skydiver, which includes, as far as I can tell, all disciplines spanning both indoor and outdoor, a coach, a pro athlete, an innovator, and of course, the creator of the new body piloting game. How'd I do on the intro?
Yeah, good. Not too bad. Pretty much covered everything. I'm definitely obsessed with the sport and have tried to do most things with it, including base, and I have wingsuited as well. So, yeah, you could definitely say that I'm a bit obsessed. Yeah.
Teaching as well?
Yes, yeah. I've been teaching for about probably 12 years now, I'd say, within the sport. I started getting my teaching qualifications, I guess, in the Army when I used to be in the Army. So I was down at the parachute training school as well, so I had a lot of education with that kind of side of things. And then after I got my TAN rating, and I thought I'd try to move into the sport as a coach and sport jumper and athlete kind of thing, I guess. So yeah, love it all.
So that's fantastic. And something that I've noticed as I've kind of been researching you, it's like you are involved in so many different aspects of this sport. Why don't you start at the beginning? How did this all start? And how did you develop an interest in skydiving?
I think I was one of those typical ones that they say from a young age, like that's all I've wanted to do was fly my body. I had thoughts of being Peter Pan or Superman or something like that as a kid, broke my foot jumping off the fence, thinking I'm Superman, and then same with climbing trees and all that. So I guess I was always obsessed with human flight. I wanted to be an astronaut, but I consider myself probably not smart enough back in the day with maths and all that stuff. But what I've learned since, it's applying yourself really. As long as you got to apply yourself and you don't take the hard roads and the hits as a negative, but you see them as a learning tool, then whatever you put your mind to, I guess you can achieve anything. So I kind of wish I had had that bit of an attitude when I was younger, because I may have taken a bit of a different route, but you never know, I may have still ended up in the same spot. And then, so after joining the Army, I wanted to try and do parachuting, and all my unit left to go overseas. I was too young, and because I wasn't in a parachute regiment, I decided to, go jumping. And then it started from there, I guess, and just like teaching. I come from a family of teachers as well. So I guess the two just kind of meshed together, and here we are.
Does Australia have a mandatory service?
No, it doesn't have a mandatory service. It's voluntary. The reason I wanted to go when I was younger was just protecting the country and all this kind of stuff. I just wanted to go and serve and have that kind of mateship and find that kind of thing you see in the movies of the friends kind of creating a good team relationship and all that. And you definitely learn a lot about teamwork and self-motivation and discipline and all this kind of stuff. I kind of rebelled and threw a lot of that out when I got out of the Army a bit as well. But then I came back to it and just learnt there's so many different and good things that came from that I have continued to use in my life now. That definitely helped with a lot of aspects. The teaching thing's a big one, just how you teach, how you. It's where I take a lot of my methods from. A lot of it does seem off the cuff as well, but there's also a method to that too. If you just follow a simple process, you're able to then teach the information quite easily. So just fall back to that process really. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And so, the little bit of exposure that I've had to drop zones is it's always interesting to see the civilian and military jumpers. My understanding is that the military world is a bit more narrow and focused in the way that you go about jumping. And it seems like, though, you've spread to so many disciplines. So I guess the military kind of sparked your interest, and then you were able to develop it more outside?
Yeah, I started skydiving before the Army, so I actually had to go and transfer my rating, and I had about 700 skydives, and I had to redo my AF course because I wasn't qualified in the military. So they'd done a quick conversion of it, but yeah, I had to go through a lot of the whole process again of redoing it. But it was kind of really good at that stage to do that, because I got the mindset of what it would be like to be an AF student all over again, from an AF student's perspective, being an experienced person. So I actually had to go through that whole process with the tests and the briefs, and they actually treating it like the first time. Obviously, I progressed a bit quicker, but it was good to kind of have that insight. So yeah, it was interesting.
As you kind of went on, I know you kind of really built up a name for yourself as well in indoor skydiving. At what point did you transfer over or kind of start doing that?
Well, that's the thing. I guess everyone in Australia at the time, we didn't have any tunnels. So I started skydiving first before I went to the tunnel. I went to the tunnel and I had about 2,000 skydives already. So I could do sequentials, 10-way sequentials, angles, turning. I was coaching a fair bit in the sky already at the time. And we could start seeing a clear difference between the skydivers in Australia that had tunnel time and the ones that didn't, and how quick they were progressing. They for sure didn't have some skills with the movement side of stuff, but that can also be developed in the tunnel now. A lot of people say you can't move the track in the tunnel. I'm sorry, but that's just a lie. You can. You just have to understand what tools you're doing to convert over to the sky, and that's where a lot of the mistakes happen. Is people don't realize they can track in the sky, and now they can, and other people tell them they can't, and they're not really worrying about the dangers that are caused, and all of a sudden these people can. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. But yeah, I transferred really to the tunnel to kind of keep up, and went over at about 2,000 jumps, done a bunch of tunnel time, because to be honest, I couldn't do head up. That was the reason. I struggled to take a dock, sit flying, and I had 2,000 jumps, and now I'm known for head up moving, which is very strange. And yeah, that was the main reason I went. And then I came back and was addicted afterwards, and realized the only way to push forward and keep progressing in this sport as a career is to go to the tunnel and learn to coach from them. And I was very lucky in Australia at the time. My path of progression, I've always tried to follow the best. So I look for who the best was to go overseas, and I try to learn from them and emulate, really.
And okay, a lot of my viewers are not going to know when you reference head up or tracking, exactly what you're talking about. So,
Yep.
So what's the best way to talk about the different types of skydiving, perhaps?
Oh, excellent. That's good to know. I can easily change my vocabulary for non-skydivers. So the skydivers,
you're clearly the expert here.
Yeah, no, that's no problem. So like skydiving, so essentially describe free flying and skydiving is the question. Skydiving and free flying. Free flying is a discipline a sub-discipline of skydiving where we attempt to fly our body in various orientations. So sometimes the head up position, which is also referred to as sit fly, where you're flying in more of a standing position to earth. So you're falling down that. And that's why I like to think of these things rather than positions, but actually thinking of them as ranges. A lot of people refer to the head up or sit fly position. We want to refer to it as a range, because we can change the speed at which we fall because of the surface area we present, either spreading our legs more to catch more air, or our arms, or even leaning back or forwards more, something like this. So that's the head up range, I guess. And then we have a head down range or orientation. So that's the same thing. You head to earth, you're falling like a missile out of a plane, straight down. You can change this as well by widening your arms, your legs, or if you want to move forwards and backwards, just like a missile would fly through the air. If it tilted rather than going straight down, it's going to kind of slip through the air a little bit more. And that's how we change and move and fly our bodies, is just by changing the presentation of how the air hits our body, and that pushes us along. You can go on your side, up, down, on your belly, or flying back to earth. So these terminologies like back fly, sit fly, belly flying, head down. Carving is essentially what it is. You're carving around in a circle, and that can be on your head or on your feet. So there's the other terminology as well. But it makes sense if you just think feet down or head up, whatever orientation that is compared to the body, and that's how we're kind of falling and flying, I guess. Just falling, really. Yeah.
And I think something, that you kind of mentioned that is really interesting is that if you kind of go back in your history, you were at 2,000 jumps, but it sounds like still just learning head down orientation. So this is a really rich and deep environment and kind of a deep skill set that has to be acquired.
Yeah, for sure. Like at that time, I was considered probably a quicker learner back then. So I could do probably 10-way sequentials. So sequentials is a 10-way group of people that get out of the plane and they hold hands. And essentially they can hold hands and then they change the way they hold their hands. They might create a round circle, then they might create a circle that looks like a flower or different patterns. Essentially, you're just changing patterns as you go. The more experience you get, the more complex they get. The simple ones earlier on are just around, and then you start off small with one person, and then you might go one person. You can't have one person for a sequential; it's a solo. So they start off very small, anywhere from a 4-way group going all the way up to 100 ways, 200 ways, and stuff like that. So yeah, it's
when I talk to non-skydivers and like, kind of for the record, I'm at 26 jumps. So, novice compared to you, or a beginner, very early compared to you. But, something that it kind of strikes me as, right, is once you get through sort of your base level learning and you're comfortable on belly fly or getting comfortable on belly fly, really what you're describing is this world beyond just the maybe the stereotype of falling on your belly to different types of flying ranges, not positions, and then ultimately flying with people, in your case 10-way. But you were part of the world record. Was it 164 man head down?
The current one at the moment is 164. They've gone for it a couple more times, but I think that's the current at the moment. So it's big, very big.
That is a mind-blowing amount of people to coordinate. What are, and is that the biggest challenge when you're trying to go for a world record like that? So it's to get the world record, I guess, what is the requirements? Do all 164 of you just have to fly in formation for a period of time?
Yeah. So all 164 people need to be pre-listed on a piece of paper or a diagram in the exact slot with the exact hand docking, and then the formation in the sky needs to be created the exact same as what that picture looks like. So even if one person is grabbing onto that formation with a wrong hand, then it doesn't count. So it needs to be completely predetermined. We're going to get this. It can be the biggest factor, I'd say, that affects it is mental state. I would think they can be very tiring, starting from early in the day, and you're sitting around all day. You're going from low altitude up to high altitude, and the one we were doing on that one in particular, the temperature on the ground at the time I think was 34 degrees or like mid to low 30s or something, and then that's Celsius. I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit. And it was about minus 14 Celsius up at height. So it was wow. It was cold. It was freezing cold. I remember sitting in just from the wind chill. We were all freezing in the plane, and the plane has a big gap and a door in it. So the air's coming through. Other people are nice and hot up the front, or a bit warmer, not hot. But they've got other problems of being cramped in the plane or something like this, or just if you run out of oxygen, you can get hypoxic. So there's a lot of mental factors. If your mind's good, if you're confident, if you get out and you're not panicking and you breathe, that's the first thing, I guess. Getting out of the plane, breathing, relaxing, not trying to freak out of where you are, and just bringing yourself into it sounds really hippie. I've never said it like that before. Bring yourself into the now, and and being situationally aware of everyone, because a lot of the time the flusteredness and the panic and oh my God, I'm doing a record, that can really get in people's heads. And when they get out, you see this hesitation, this stiffness that comes over people in the panic mode. So their awareness now isn't in the peripherals, because you've got 163 other people going on. Their awareness is this tunnel vision. And to get that awareness more open is just, I guess, being able to breathe and take that time. And that panic mode can happen anywhere from being uncomfortable on the ground uncomfortable in the plane. It just takes that one moment that stresses you throughout the day. And then, yeah, so being able to have 164 people all on that wavelength at once, or even more, that's probably the most difficult thing. The skill level is not, it's necessary, but it's, I believe, the mindset of being able to deal in an uncomfortable situation comfortably.
That's interesting that you flag kind of mindset as the predominant skill set here required to achieve that. And is that because in part, I'm guessing with a head down flight like that, there's a relatively narrow time window where people need to kind of hit their positions quickly to make sure you achieve what you need to?
Yep, but I think, to be honest, this has to do with absolutely everything in skydiving is mindset. I find it from the beginning of my beginning skydivers to the experienced skydivers. And no matter what you do, probably any experienced dangerous sport, and this is the same in base jumping, when I was base jumping, doing that stuff, we have to have our mind on, if you're nervous about jumping off, and this is when I stopped base jumping, because when I was younger, I never used to get scared on a cliff. I'd walk up to the edge, I've got a parachute on, I'm like, yeah, cool, this is good. I'd see other people sitting there shaking, and I'm like, what's wrong with you, man? And they're like, well, what's wrong with you? I'm like, well, we're about to get off. That's what we're here to do, no? Like, I'm nervous, don't get me wrong, I've accepted it, but this is what the Army could have helped me with as well. When we're going to go into you're in the battle, you got to switch that mindset on. So when it comes time to do that, if you got that second guessing in your head, it's going to be an issue. And I stopped base jumping when I was over in one for an injury as well, but the injury came after this, and I believe my mindset was holding tension in my body, which caused the injury. I went to get off a cliff, and I remember looking at my friend, and I looked over the edge, and I was like, whoa, that's high. And then looked at my mate, and he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, that's real high, man. He's like, yeah, get off. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, geez, I haven't really felt this before. This is a weird feeling. And all of a sudden, this new anxiety came over me. And later on that trip, I felt like I tore my trapezium, and my whole arm caught on fire. This is on opening of the parachute. I had whiplash, and it tore an old injury further down my back, and I couldn't lift my arm up. My whole arm caught on fire, and I couldn't reach the toggles, the steering lines, or anything like this. So I had to grab my elbow of my bung hand. I could close my fist, but I couldn't lift the arm. Lift the elbow up to the steering line, grab that, drop my arm, and then grab the other one, and then put both steering lines in one hand, and then we call it flaring, so pull the lines to slow the parachute down and stall it out and land, essentially. So that was a big lesson in mindset. Sometimes nothing good happens after fuck it. That's another good one. So sometimes a lot of good things happen, a lot of fun things happen, but a lot of the time most injuries happen when you've gone, fuck it, let's do it anyway. And then, so I'll try to take that on board. And
I didn't realize how important that mindset is to you, and it's kind of fascinating to explore a little bit. So what's the difference between? It sounds like in the early days of when you were doing base, you would go up to a cliff and you would just be. I guess I would describe it as, it sounds like very in the moment, maybe not thinking too far ahead or too far in the back, just kind of existing where you need to be to kind of execute, if you will. What's the difference between that and maybe the more cavalier attitude where you say, hey, let's just go for it?
Yeah, the difference is when I'm relaxed and stuff, I've thought it through that much that even though I'm in the moment, I've thought about the prep and I've thought about the ending. So I know that I'm coming prepared, and I know that not necessarily that nothing's going to happen, but I have what we call standard operating procedures. So we have a bunch of things that if something could go wrong, these are the options to fix it. And if another thing goes wrong, then these are the options to fix it. So I have outs, essentially. Whereas when I'm like, fuck it, it's like I've thought of it. I've thought of one thing that could go wrong, and then, she'll be right, kind of the Aussie she'll be right attitude. And that's where when I haven't, things always has the possibilities to go wrong, but if you don't have an out, then you kind of leave yourself in a hole and you're stuck, and you're like, oh, damn it, I haven't really thought of this situation. And it can be something like if you get injured, okay, I'm going to get injured, I might break my ankle on this one, but I have all day to hike out of the mountain and get help. I might break my ankle on this one, but it's going on nighttime and I'm going to be stuck in the thing. Maybe it's not a good idea to base jump. So Might not be a good idea to base jump in the first case because you could break your ankle, but they're the different outs that I'm talking about. You always want to have an out for something. And yeah, if your out is gone because of an injury or from a late night sleep or from partying too much or from something else, then you want to try and minimize those things. It's usually 3 things that happen that cause an incident. And that can happen in anything, driving a car, whatever.
Sure. And that is something that I've noticed as I've kind of gotten into the sport a little bit and talked to a few different skydivers, is that there does seem to be a little bit of a common thread, if you will, of contingency planning, and it is really rehearsed top to bottom. And it sounds like this is true all the way from base jumping to formation or sequential skydiving, or just you individually jumping.
Yeah, for sure. It's I guess something that happens in the sport and that we all do a lot automatically that we don't even realize. But that would be a big factor in it if you put it that way, for sure. Yeah, I'm going to steal that off you. That's good.
You're free to take it all by all means. Okay. Now, but if we back up in your kind of story to your past and your history timeline, right? It sounds like you were at a stage where you had 2,000 jumps, which to somebody who has never skydived is an incredible amount of jumps. I don't. How many? Do you know how many you're up to at this point?
No, I don't think so. Like, I stopped logging after I started working in the tunnel, and I think I had about 2.5 or something like that when I was working in the tunnel. So from then on, which was that was almost over 10 years ago. So yeah, I'd have a fair bit now, and I had that amount of jumps pretty quick as well because I was just jumping a lot. So 15 years, yeah. So it took me about 4 years. For about 4 years, I think it took me to get to 2,000. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then, so it's at some point along the way, right? I think I'd read in an article about you. So Australia at the time didn't have any indoor skydiving facilities. So it sounded like, you started jumping in the a bit earlier days of this or so. Would that be around 2008, 2005?
Yeah, I think I started jumping in 2007, I think. And at that time, There was a lot of what we call the vertical skydiving. There was there's more than 2 separate types of skydiving. That 2 separate types of skydiving that I was interested in at the time was the vertical skydiving and the moving skydiving. So skydiving where you're traveling across the ground, like tracking, and then we're flying in like flocks of birds. So formations like the birds fly outside where they're flying in formation. And then there's the vertical one where you're creating the shapes and the patterns and stuff like that. So they were starting to be quite developed in Australia at the time. There was no real dynamic kind of skydiving, which there is around now, and that's a big part of it, where everything of those 2 sub-disciplines have kind of mixed together, and now it's just more of this dynamic kind of flocking stuff that you see these days. It's a bit sad because in Australia itself, not necessarily in America, each continent, it seems, has their own kind of focus and goals. So this is more so just Australia. America's been very much known for its vertical skydiving and its sequentials, so it's pattern building and all this kind of stuff and the different formations and that. You guys are really, really good at all that stuff. Still the best in the world, in my opinion. And then we have Europeans, where they're a lot more of the moving and the flocking and the formation stuff, like the birds and all that kind of we're doing. Australia's always been a bit of a mix between the 2, and they kind of try to learn a lot. We're quite lucky because we have such a small community that because of that, it's also bred us skill level wise quite quickly, and we can kind of have the best of both worlds and go overseas and learn from everything. But it held us back for quite a while there because we had no full-time coaches in Australia. There was no tunnels, so it was a lot of, like in the beginning of every sport, people who have other jobs and they're doing it for fun. That's exactly how I started out, and I guess I was one of the first, if not the first, to come back to Australia. But me, and along with my teammate Keith Greeley, came back to Australia, and we kind of started the first wave of full-time skydivers and coaches, I guess, free flight coaches. There's probably a bunch of us around today now, so it's good to see the sport growing in that way.
It's really interesting to hear that every continent, if you will, has developed kind of its own skydiving culture. What was the motivation that kind of drove you to Europe in the first place?
I guess it was more my style. I like more of the moving kind of jumps. I love doing sequentials, but I like doing dynamic flying. So the flying of all orientations and looking like you're essentially swimming around a fishbowl, I guess, is how to put the wind tunnel stuff that we were doing. It's more, I felt like it was more Peter Pan flying, I guess, is the way to put it. And you're flying your body, and that's what it would feel like to be a bird. So if I'm going to put it down to basic stuff, it's me wanting to be a kid still. Yeah.
Up where I am, it's interesting. A lot of the indoor skydivers or the tunnels talk a little bit about kind of a rift between indoor and outdoor skydiving. And what struck me through your videos and even talking to you now is that you seem to seamlessly go in between both worlds. Do you notice that in Australia or in Europe, that sort of distinction exists, or is that maybe just a US thing?
I guess it started at a certain time from it's definitely in Europe as well, but maybe not so much probably. There's a couple factors of the reasons why. In Australia, it's a lot more prominent of how you're saying of there's the rift, I find, so it's probably the same in America. And the reason I believe why is because our countries have a lot more all year round jumping that we do. So we jump throughout the year, except for, I guess, in the northern states. So because of that, the rift can be because one or the other is stealing customers or clients from each other. That can happen, or also the safety aspect, because people learn differently. Like, you skydiver, you're going to have to go back and learn because you're going to hit the wall. And then the skydivers go on the tunnel flies, you don't know how to track, you be careful, your spatial awareness isn't really there, watch out for your canopy. So there's that kind of little banter thing, I guess, how New Zealand and Australia and Canada and Canada and America are, like the little brother kind of banter between cousins and brothers. So it's kind of that rift as well. So also in Europe, I don't believe there was as much rift because they're more on seasonal jumping. So they have to jump a lot more in summer, and then in winter time, it's their time for winter, for tunnel. So they get their different sports. So they really complement each other. So that's why a lot of the movement flies and the trackers, the flocking kind of groups are all over in Europe because, and I say you can learn tracking in the tunnel, it's all over in Europe. And a lot of those guys do dynamic flying in the tunnel where you're flying around the fishbowl, not just doing formations. So it's not really a rift, but you'll still see that rift at certain drop zones as well throughout Europe, that the hardcore people that have only skydived, sometimes that's because they're really good skydivers and they feel embarrassed that they're not as good as in the tunnel. So that's also where the problem comes, because they're skydivers for 20, 30 years and they're like, tunnel coming here and you guys think you're... So there's also that ego rift too. So there's so many things that go into it. And the reason, I guess, why I have not had that was, one, because I got into it very young. I started skydiving not in the tunnel. So I had the respect as a skydiver first. So people can't go, you're a tunnel rat. I am a tunnel rat. I've done lots of tunnel. But I also was a skydiver first. And that's where certain people in America, they'll also have the same thing as me, because they were skydivers first that have moved into the tunnel. So it does become, unfortunately, those little things. But I've also now seen so many good skydivers come from the tunnel in Australia as well that were first tunnel flyers. They didn't even skydive and they had a lot of time in the tunnel. Now they've transferred over to skydiving, and they're some of the best skydivers in Australia, if not starting to become the world as well. So I think just that open mindset and having that open mindset and that collaboration is going to be really important for the future in our sport. Did a bit of a tongue twister there. It's going to be really important for the future of our sport is to join them, and also to be able to start bridging the gap between the non-skydiver and allowing them an insight into our sport. So it's going to be about using the words that are relatable. It's going to be about educating in a simplified way, and being able to show what we're doing and why we're doing it, and create some actual meaning to it, rather than just we fall out of a plane and do a Brody like on Point Break. So there's so much more to it.
A fun and classic movie. I think it sounds like we're both of the age that that was an iconic movie during our childhood.
Yeah, definitely.
It's funny. Right. One of the things that I picked up on, and actually this is true in my case, two of my three indoor skydiving instructors have never gone outside, which is something that I find I was shocked at, kind of before I started tunnel flying or indoor skydiving. Is there a right way to say that? People have told me that tunnel flying is correct and indoor skydiving is wrong. Is that true?
Same thing. I don't really care what's correct with it. It's like tunnel flying, indoor skydiving, body flying. Like there's so many things you could call it. So whatever you would like.
Basically, I feel like you and I have the same attitude. As long as you get there to the end point, it's all good in terms of that.
Yeah, all roads lead to Rome.
Perfect. But what I find interesting, right, is that tunnel flying, if you will, has really it's developed almost as a sport unto its own, not just as a perhaps training aid. That it sounds like you started maybe thinking, hey, this is going to be more of a training aid, but has morphed, and I think is evidenced by many instructors or many coaches have never actually skydived outside. This is one of the first videos that I found of you. And I know you've got many different instructional videos that have helped me kind of learn to sit fly and this kind of stuff. But your style of flying is so fluid. Can you maybe talk me through what's happening here? What are the four of you going for?
So there's no real plan with what we're doing. We're just kind of flying lines, I guess, the way we put it. So it's a follow the leader type thing. And this is a four-way follow the leader. I'm the one in green, so I'm leading, so it's quite easy to spot me. We don't always have different colored suits for leaders and stuff. It's just, that's my suit. So we're trying to fly with each other, kind of quite matched spacing around the tunnel. With this, it creates more room for outs, I guess, as I was talking about before, for adjustment and stuff like this. If you're riding right up each other's bum and you're flying really close to each other, you can take the other person's air, so you can burble them, and it causes them to drop, or it causes instability or something like this. So we want to try and give each other as much space as possible. It also allows us to fly really quick. The more space you have, the faster you can fly. So we're starting, each time we fly, we're building up that speed and generating it, and then allowing us to carry us up and down. So you'll see how sometimes when we're up the top of the tunnel, we're really steep. That means we're creating less surface area, so we drop after that, and that's what's causing us to come down. And when we're at the bottom of the tunnel, we flatten our bodies out, and then this is what takes us up. It can be done. You can see the difference, I guess, between me and the other guys. They're a bit less experienced. And I guess the more you fly, the more relaxed you can become, and you can feel the wind. There's a lot of teachers and coaches out there that teach a tension body and stiff and tight and rigid. But this is just going to cause rigidity in the body, and it's going to be like, imagine if you're trying to be a robot and you're walking along the ground with your arms and legs really stiff like that. It's just not going to be as relaxed as if you're just walking along the ground normally. So over time, you can feel that dead spot that your body creates above you, and you can actually start manipulating how much air you expose your body to very precisely. It's just quite a lot like swimming. I used to swim when I was younger as well. I used to compete and swim for New South Wales, one of the states in Australia. I think that helps a lot when you're trying to fly. Is not just like being able to fly very fluid in the water, but also multiple different sports, being able to use your body in many different ways. So not just football or soccer or anything like this, but yeah, multiple different things. Yeah, that was a flight at Sydney, that one.
Too. I'm comparing it, and I'm gonna overlay my brother and I, are kind of learning together, and we fly so rigid in comparison to kind of your style of this like real fluid, real dynamic, if you will. In a follow the leader setup, if you're person 2 or person 3, are you locked on to just the person in front of you, or do you have awareness of everyone in the tunnel?
So this is interesting. I'm teaching, I have been teaching a fair bit, the 4 different 4-way groups, but yesterday I had a particular 4-way group I was teaching that with in the tunnel, and they're just beginning. So it was their first or second session yesterday as a group. I've done a lot of other time with them, but it was very interesting to see going from 2 people in the tunnel to 3 people in the tunnel, and having all 3 people who have flown with each other before, but now they're flying with 4 of us, and their eyes were just locked on me the whole time. Or they locked the eyes, as you said, on the one in front of them as well. So the whole time that we're in there for the first couple of drills was just expanding their awareness and getting them to start seeing each other. And once they could see each other, then they could start flying these clean lines that you're seeing or cleaner lines that you're seeing on the video there. As soon as they're not aware of it and they're not able to take in, as you said, everything, or even just a couple more things, that's when it'll start stopping and starting and stuff. So it's not necessarily a must to learn, but it's definitely something that is necessary to learn, which kind of contradicts each other. Yeah, if you want to progress, you got to start opening the eyes up. So, yeah, don't have to do it to do it, but that's good.
Because I feel like, as a relative beginner, I would just be locked on the person in front of me and trying desperately that my thought would be, if I just, make sure I mirror that person, I'm going to, stay out of everybody's way and fly a relatively clean line.
Yep. Big time.
And so does that, and so does that mean that, the person last who's like anchoring that, are they relatively speaking a stronger flyer, the first and final positions, or how do you set that up?
Yes and no. So it depends on the majority of people in the group, and some people might be stronger in other areas because some might just have different body flying styles and body like types and stuff like that. So they might be well suited, but in an ideal world, I believe, and this may be different than any others, so some people may believe very differently, but for the type of flying that we're doing here of just follow the leader type, I believe 1 and 4 should definitely be the most experienced, and purely because most of the time it's number 1 and 4 that are looking at each other because they're setting the spacing of that tunnel. The more they can buzz past each other and have a close call, the more space the other guys have to make adjustments. So if number 4 isn't not watching where number 1 is, they might get hit by number 1, but ideally number 1 should not hit them because they should be looking at them. So number 1 should always see number 4, and they're not looking at 2 or 3, they're looking at that 4th person. But what I'm doing when I'm doing that is I'm actually shooting the gap. So I'm looking as I go up, and as I start getting to the top, I can see where the gap of number 4 is, and I'll aim for that part. If I aim for a certain point in the tunnel, so I'm not going to a certain direction or anything, I'm just shooting that gap every time, and then I'm setting the next move I do according to that. I know I have options to either go left, to go right, or to go straight up. And I have 3 or 4 different options, and I choose whatever one seems good at the time. And that way the other people, if they've done that line before, they can see what's coming and follow that a lot easier without having to see necessarily what I'm doing because the pattern looks the same. If you get new people, a lot of this time it stops and starts, and that's fine. But with time, repetition, and explanation, which I've found, we have to talk about what the goal is outside of the tunnel afterwards or before, then they can pick it up quite quick. Yeah.
I find this whole thing, so mind blowing and so like almost overwhelming. And it's just incredible to watch both the speed and then, kind of the adjustments that make, it's really cool to see. I'll see you flying up front or, your anchor flying in back. It seems like at specific and maybe strategic times, you're cutting the line, if you will, to shorten or expand the distance to kind of space it out to keep everything in motion. And that's the most incredible part to me, is that this doesn't seem or it doesn't sound like it's overly rehearsed. It's very much a fluid, in the moment kind of maneuver.
There's many different disciplines of the dynamic skydiving as well in the tunnel. So that's now moving into the tunnel, going from skydiving, free flying being a sub-discipline of skydiving. Now it's kind of the main discipline of tunnel flying. You have, or in Australia at least, there's the dynamic kind of thing, which is a lot more very popular, because you can do it from early. You can do it from semi-beginner. Once you start carving around on your belly, you're doing dynamic. Whereas VFS and a lot of the other points, besides flat, you can do that early too. The VFS, which is the vertical skydiving, where you're creating formations, this takes a fair bit to start getting into. But when you start doing the dynamic that you're seeing on the video, or like on the experience stuff, that takes way longer than what the formation skydiving takes. So it's okay.
So this dynamic flying and follow the leader, it sounds like it was, if I'm kind of following the arc, the timeline here, this was the precursor to your new sport, if you will, body piloting.
Yeah. So with that, it came from like the dynamic four-way stuff we were doing. So it was a lot more rigid, and it's the four-way stuff you would have seen then, but we have specific dictated points and patterns that we need to match now. So it's not necessarily formations, but it was patterns that you had to repeat in flying in the competition. And this is the one that I used to compete with my old team Southern Fly in. We competed a bunch overseas for the competitions in Prague, and it's called D4W. And it was very similar to what skydiving competitions were like. So it's very similar to like having to create a dance routine, and then you have to do a specified routine that every other person does as well. So you get judged on the routine you create personally, and then you get judged on the routine that every single other team has to do. So it was a freedom kind of sport of flying your body, but it was in rigid kind of rules. And I just didn't like rigid rules, I guess, from being in the army. As I said, I rebelled a bit when I got out, and I just wanted to go and fly my body and follow each other and just feel like I was flying without having to have structure towards it. So a lot of us did used to do this dynamic flying like you saw on the video just before, for fun. And then when it came to competition, we done something else. And with it, because it adjusts so much when we're following each other, the whole time the leader has to be looking not just at that spacing, but you're looking at the facial expressions of the other people too, trying to judge whether they're tired, whether they got enough energy to keep going with simple lines, or whether you can amp it up and make it difficult, what their mindsets are. Whereas with the other formation, you're set in this the rigid kind of patterns that you have to do, and it's just go. And when you get scored on it, you're scored on those. So I liked it. It increased my ability massively, because you have to learn to fly really precise and stuff like that. But I definitely found personally that I more so enjoyed the follow the leader method of just following my mates and let them lead a couple, and then I lead a couple, then my other friend does, and you just get used to kind of just like jamming with your friends, jamming at the skate park, going for a burn or surf or playing the musical instrument. Yeah.
Absolutely. It sounds like too, like how I always think about it in my head is like almost ice skating versus hockey. Let me know if that's a reasonable analogy, right? Where in ice skating, you have this, there you go, this pre-planned routine, if you will, which is obviously a lot of fun and great to do both in the air and the tunnel. And it sounds like you progressed enormously, and as well as that's your first foray into maybe being a professional athlete in this sport. But the new, or where you're taking it, this follow the leader, is a much more, I guess I would say, dynamic environment.
Yeah, for sure. Like, and it's funny because the follow the leader stuff used to be around before the other competition. The other competition got created as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they wanted to have a competition for dynamic. So I was lucky enough to live, and this is probably where I got a lot of my, like, not probably, it is where I got a lot of my ins. I was very heavily involved I was very involved in the creation of that old competition as well. I lived next door to the guy that created it, or one of the guys that created it. So there was a bunch of people. There was many. It wasn't just one. And I got to watch him build the comp and build all the competitions, see how the judging went, see how all this went. So I got to learn all about comps and the building of it and my basis from that. So I actually created the body piloting competition that you're talking about, living next door to him at the same time as that, because after he'd finished, there was still a lot of talk within the community that how do we find the best team when it's still what we're judging it off is subjective. So it's not necessarily a yes, they did better than them. It's still, there's that subjective mentality of the routine that is created. Now, the problem is you can get rid of the routine, but then now it's just the structured format of the race pattern that's you have to do. So now there goes our fluid, enjoyable part that we all love doing, of following each other and creating nice patterns and all this kind of stuff and not having structure and rigidity, to now the competition's just rigid. And that's how we figure out who the best flyers are. But that's not the best flyers at flying themselves, that's the best flyers at that rigid competition where you can't express yourself. So because of the politics that I saw happening, I wanted to create a comp that showed something else, but I was also quite nervous of this. So this competition that I had has been around I've had the framework for it for about 8 years, maybe more. Wow. And I've been working on it since then. And a lot of the things I've been trying to avoid was the politics of it, and also trying to get the competition to a standard where when the cheese holes that were still exposed at that time, back then when I was creating it, and they were cheese holes, they definitely were, until I could fix those. And I didn't want to release it because there were some safety concerns. There were some issues of like, what do we do if blind moves, if you can't see the person, and all this kind of stuff. So until they're resolved, the problem with releasing something like that is it can get misconstrued, and it can then get taken out of context, where now what could once be a good thing is now ruined, because now the same politics of how should we have the comp, we need to have it this way, we need to have it this way, that now falls back into play. Now, there's always going to be changes and stuff, and there should be changes and there should be development. But I think before something's released, I don't want to see the same path as the other skydiving competitions that have happened, or dynamic comps go down, because there's always been and continues to be arguments about who's really better and who's all this, and it's just sad. It's sad because it's something we all like, but in saying that, at the same time, these things have all been fixed. A lot are continuously being fixed, and I'm not shying away from doing those comps, because I still do D4W, I still do artistic skydiving, I still do all these other things, so I still will go and compete in all these other competitions because I love them. But they're the reasons I created this other one.
Well, now, because it seems like sort of this whole, I would say, like, ecosystem is still, is growing and primed for growth, but it's still it sounds like a relatively small world or insulated world. I'm guessing the majority of people have never heard of all these competitions, and it's interesting to hear about kind of the nuances that are present in every single one. What strikes me as really interesting from your idea and your direction, right, is that you're pushing it on a much more, I would almost say, like, head-to-head competition style is what you've developed with this game, right? And just to make sure that I understand, right, this is the nature of this body piloting, right? Is that if you were leading, you would throw a move, and then it's my job to mimic that move, if you will.
Yes. So this is also another reason why I created this competition, is because I wanted something that was very simple for people to understand. And a lot of the time in the other comps, so there's the two factors. The one was because I wanted to create a comp that we could purely see who the best flyer is, not the team, not this, but who is the best flyer. And it comes down to what you said then, is if you do something, I have to copy it. And that essentially is, if you can do what I can do, but I can't do what you can do, well, there's the better flyer, in my opinion. And that was so it was three things, sorry. There was the first one, to create a competition that we could see the best flyer. The second one was to create a comp that the public could understand easily, and therefore we can now start getting the sport to a wider audience and start getting promotional stuff in, start getting people with full-time jobs in it, commentators for stuff. Like, it's just going to grow the sport. And then the third thing, which is an extremely main one as well, was the easily bridging gap between the non-skydiver or the non-tunnel flyer and the experienced tunnel flyer. We needed to create a competition that you could do at all levels with a stage progression from beginner to experienced. And that was another thing with this. So you can do it as soon as you can go from do a transition from your belly to your back, you can do this competition. And that's the most important thing, that you have all those three aspects. And if you have those three aspects, the sport's going to be able to grow. If you don't appeal to people that are outside the sport and they can't understand you within 3 or 4 seconds of walking in and go, oh, I get what's going on here, then it's not going to be captivating. Football, soccer, all these things, tennis, ball over that, all in there, simple. Yes, there's way more other things that are complicated within the sport itself, and that's for the fans and the diehard fans to get involved in and obsess over and have their player to follow and all this kind of stuff. But for the sport to work, it has to be, it's like for kids sport to get into football. You can do it from a kid age as a kid, and then they can play it all the way through. And even when you stop playing, you can still watch it as a fan as well. And that's been the main growth of this, is to be able to try and grow the sport of indoor skydiving for the people that aren't skydivers, to be able to understand it, participate, and even the parents be able to follow their kids and know what's coming next for them.
I could not agree with that more. And that I feel like is a statement that resonates with me. You know, even somebody like me who now has a couple of hours in a wind tunnel, I look at some of these competitions and am just almost overwhelmed, and, you know, by how fast and, you know, not sure what's going on. And that's something that I took away from watching on your second YouTube channel or your current one, is watching the competition, kind of the match head to head, is that you can immediately sort of start to parse out and it resonates. That there's kind of a point aspect of this, and can you follow along from that standard? You mentioned that there are, it sounds like, several different, I guess I would call it tiers of flying. I think online I saw that it was low speed, mid speed, and high speed.
Yeah, so that website at the moment, if you go on the website, it's quite basic at the moment. The main rules are in the rule book. I guess that's where you'll find the official rules. If you want to go and play it yourself, or if you're interested in just looking and you don't skydive, just go and check out some of the videos. It's constantly being updated. I used to be a perfectionist and not want to release anything until it was all done perfectly, and I've learned from a lot of people and friends that just get it out there and keep adjusting it as it goes on. Try not to slack off. So it is basic. There's more videos of the competitions going up every couple of weeks now. We'll have the next one should be up in the next day or so, the next match. So we've only got one match up there at the moment. And when it comes to regarding the ranking system, we do it off speeds. So to play the competition and the game that I'm talking about, we divide the tunnel, so the fishbowl, into 3 different sections or zones. You have a bottom zone, a middle zone, and a top zone. And just like you saw in the footage before, how we're going down the bottom and up the top, and we're carrying our speed. What we're doing in the competition is we're trying to fly, if we're in a head down orientation, so head to earth, we're trying to fly our helmet into that top zone. Now the follower has to match. If their head doesn't match into that zone, then they get a point against them. If the leader's head doesn't go into that zone, then nothing matters. Okay, and it's the same for the bottom zone as well. If they go in the bottom zone, the follower has to match. If they're not in a head down orientation, so head to the ground, and they're in the head up orientation, then their shoes need to go into either of these zones. Same with tricks. If they copy the trick, they have to copy the trick. In saying that, so we have that's the basic profile, or the basic format of it is following the leader into this, so it's like a court. And then you have the different skill levels. So you have the beginner and to experienced, and we've done this similar to what I would say is UFC. I've structured this off. So mixed martial arts. It's been a big inspiration with this. You have, say in karate, a white belt, and then you have a black belt, and you have all the belts in between. So we've created a skill level that you can go from beginner to advanced, but because you have also a lightweight and a heavyweight You're not going to put a lightweight white belt against a black belt heavyweight. They're going to get their ass kicked. So you have the higher speed and low speed. So in history, the US, you guys used to, over in the US and Canada, in that area of the world, you used to do a lot of static and higher speed, and you learn a lot more dynamic at a higher speed kind of thing. In Europe, they'd learn a lot more low speed. So their styles would be a little bit more different. Europe would be a bit more fluidity, and the States would be a bit more kind of rigid. And now they're kind of meshing together. So you have that middle range as well. Australia's always kind of been a bit of a mix between the two. So because of that, that's where I wanted to create these different structures of progression with a table of high speed to low speed, so lightweight to heavyweight or heavyweight to lightweight, and then a white belt through to a black belt. So you'd have the different skill ranges there. So the belts verse each other in that kind of range, and so you're not going to compromise. So that way you can kind of pick now where you're at, and you can see if I'm a white belt in a low speed category or whatever, because there's about 5 different categories, you know what you'd need to do to progress to the next stage. If that all makes sense.
That's a fantastic explanation of kind of what's going on and how you're developing this into an emerging sport, really. And so you've had your first competition. Was that the competition that was held back in November?
Yep, that was the November one. So that comp was to trial the judging system that we've created. So we have created a judging system that's on the computer and automated, so you can sign in on your phone, and then you scan the QR code and you become the top judge. So this is where I want to eventually put this out to everyone, so they can scan the QR code. It records all your stats. It records where you busted. It records the history, which matches you've had. So you can kind of essentially go in and log in for your comp and verse anyone anywhere in the world and start moving up this ranking ladder. Once you move up, it's kind of like how computer gaming works. So the gaming guys, they verse their own little pods, and then once they get up, then they can start moving into different competitions, being invited to pro leagues and stuff like this. So that's the goal to go into in the end, and that's the main thing that we were testing out, was just if the system worked. That was probably maybe the maybe 7th or 8th competition I've ran of them, but it's the first one that I advertised. Okay. Because I was actually confident now, finally, that I'd worked out the kinks of the comp, and now it's need to work on other things. So I was very hesitant to release stuff, but I had been approached by many people, and as I said to you before, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I realized it's time, just stick it out there, and just people want to play, they can play. Like, if you want to do the game, hit me up for the rules. I'll give you them, I'll help you out, not a problem. I just want to try and make it so it was at least a lot of the hurdles had been achieved, and now it was more on putting the bow and ribbon on it and making it look a bit more pretty. So that's why the website's not ideal, but I promise it will get better.
I hear you on that one. In my former career, we used to call that MVP, minimum viable product, is all you need to get out to production. So I know that there's always a tension between that perfectionist and just kind of good enough that it's viable. Yeah. And so you are releasing, because that's how I first found out about it. So I'm really glad that you just went ahead and even though you would like it to be tied up a little bit more, pushed it out. And then so you're subsequently releasing all of those matches on a monthly timeline or a bi-weekly sort of thing?
The next thing we need to get going, besides the judging system, is the live stream. And we need to get the live stream format sorted so we can have the recordings done straight away. Because what we did is we recorded everything on a whole heap of different cameras, and that's why the top camera fizzled out a little bit, and one of the cameras for one of the other matches fizzled out. So it's trying to juggle all of them and then splice them together. And because the commentary was done on a mic during it, I'm going and re-commentating everything a bit more proper. So my goal is to try and put something out there that to get the next stage of sponsorship and to get actual ability for someone to sponsor and see this as a viable thing to show their product or create more of a sport where we can start really paying the competitors, because I don't want to just have a competition where they're constantly spending tens of thousands of dollars and they get a pat on the back or something like this. I want to actually create this as a big sport. So to do that, to get a sponsor, I need to show proof of concept. And that's what we're doing here, is we're showing proof of concept of where we want to go with it, what the potential goal is, what the opportunities are. And once we have that proof of concept in a larger form, and that's why I say the website will be improving, as long as with the games and the matches, I've got mates lined up to commentate it with me. Just definitely the most awkward thing is commentating your own match, I would say. That's very awkward to do at the moment. Yeah.
It's just so much fun to watch it all, because you're, putting it together, you're commentating, and then, competing, and you're actually it looks like the reigning champion as well. So it's a all-inclusive world that you got going on here.
Yeah, I was lucky on that one. When we rejudged the rules, I only beat Vinny by 1 point, and that's why when I'm rejudging the matches as well, to make sure they match with what we got with the judging system to prove that it worked. And there was a couple of fuck-ups on that match, and he almost actually got me. So, yeah, I almost lost that.
Okay. So it was a little bit tighter. You weren't just dusting everybody. That's good to hear that there's a healthy competition.
Yeah, it was close, but I did win. Yeah.
I love the commentary because it is such a high-speed sport, but watching you kind of walk through it and really keep pace with what's happening, you can kind of carry the audience along, and it's a great opportunity to showcase everything. So what that you've been referring to that website, just give a shout out for what website should everybody be going to?
So it's called bodypiloting.com. I call it body piloting because body flying is already out there and all that kind of stuff. So I figured body piloting is an easy one to call it. It's we're piloting our body. That's what we're doing. So bodypiloting.com. It will have a whole heap of stuff about the rules. It's going to have some of the matches that you saw recently. It will have their stats of all the competitors that played in this one. Eventually, my goal is to spread this out and do this all over. But for now, we're just going to structure it kind of to show a bit of what the concept and the goal is. It's also got a whole heap of video not tutorials, but video demonstrations of the moves, of what you'll see in some of the rules, or the ranking system that's on there. So you'll see some of those will correlate to the videos. And eventually what I'm going to be doing is putting a tutorial educational section on there, just like the Down Under Dynamics page and website and stuff that I have with that. So my coaching one on the side that I do, which that's my main job, I guess, coaching. So it'll be similar to that, where I'll actually break down all the flying. I'm going to do the competition breakdowns as well. So I'll actually, rather than commentating the match, I'll do breakdowns of the match and explaining the mentality between what the flyers were thinking, what the best option was there, why they did that, how that's going to be better, what was a blind move, and kind of just breaking everything down more. So just putting content out there so people can actually follow it and understand it. And the only thing I ask is just if people have questions, send them my way. The only thing is some things does take time, because literally I'm doing everything from the Facebook, Insta, all my Down Under Dynamics, the website building, the posters, like the video editing. Sorry, not all the video editing. A lot of the video editing is done by my mate, All Beef Creative, so allbeef.com. He does most of the video editing, and then I do a bunch of the other stuff. So we kind of do that a bit of 50-50. All the really good stuff's his. Yeah. The stuff that doesn't look like the good stuff, that's mine. But yeah, all the commentating, everything. Yeah.
And Mason, you've got your hands full. Your plate is very much overflowing, and I really appreciate you taking the time today to out of your busy schedule. I know you've got actually a coaching session later today to stop and discuss your life and skydiving and now this new competition with me. So thanks for coming on the podcast.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Eric. Yeah, it's been real good. Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you.